Welcome to the first breakout session of the day. I'm Michael Schultz. I run product marketing and customer marketing at Commerce. I'm also German, so this whole potato salad, hot dog situation was perfect for me. I actually just want to go back there. So whoever organized food, thumbs up. I'm happy to organize to announce our next speaker, Andy Hoar. We've gone way back over the years, different companies, different organizations. Always been a pleasure to work with Andy on thought leadership pieces. He's now writing a book, which he will all tell you about. The one thing that I learned about Andy is he hates deep sea fishing. I've invited him probably 5 times, and he's never once set foot on board of any boat. But that's a story for another time, maybe tonight. I'm handing over to Andy now. He's going to take you through kind of like his observations as kind of like this agentic shift hits B2B. And afterwards, we have a few questions, Q&A, if you guys want. I'll be roving around. Andy, stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So what Michael didn't tell you is I don't hate deep sea fishing. I just hate deep sea fishing with Michael. This guy's crazy, all right? He runs triathlons, the ultra marathon stuff. That's what I mean. I'm just afraid to go out on a boat with you because I don't know what I'm going to come back in. That's it. Not the deep sea fishing. I'm okay with that. Well, hey, welcome, everybody. We've got a really interesting session today, at least by my standards. I think it's interesting because everybody's talking about agentic, right? Everybody's talking about bots. Everybody's talking about AI, what's coming next, et cetera. So I stuck my neck out there and I wrote a damn book about it, which I'll talk to you about here in a moment. So I'm double fisting here because I have to actually operate 2 completely different things here. So if I screw that up, please be patient with me, and I guarantee you I will screw it up. Okay. So I want to start this presentation by talking a little bit about the past. So in 1881, Thomas Edison put in the first power or electricity generating station in Manhattan, 1881. So it was designed to replace the steam engine, which is the prevailing sort of generative power technology of the time. So 20 years pass, right? That's a long time. What do you think happened? Anybody want to guess what percentage of the generative power had transitioned in that 20-year period of time from steam engine to electricity? Just throw a number out, anybody. 10%? What else? 1%. You guys are pretty close. A whopping 5%. Now, it was a greatly superior technology. That wasn't even in question. Everybody knew that. Everybody believed that. So why did it take 20 years? Well, the answer is it didn't take 20 years. It actually took 50 years. See, I'm clicking I already screwed it up. Yeah, it took 50 years because nothing changed. People continued doing exactly what they were doing before. So it was really humans who hadn't changed the processes, the paradigms, the methodologies, any of that. And as a result, nothing happened until 1931. And I think it had something to do with the fact that we had gone through the Great Depression, et cetera, and people had finally caught up with it. And so what ended up happening was this. Somebody named Henry Ford discovered that there's a difference between using electric motors and steam engines. The difference is the electric motor can project electricity over space and over length, whereas the steam engine, you had to be right next to the damn machine. What did that mean? It meant this. It meant that people could actually have an electric motor next to their desk, and they could do craftsman work. There were no craftsmen prior to that. It also meant, you can see the other photo there. Hang on a second. It also meant that you could have an assembly line. And that was the invention of the assembly line. There was no assembly line with a steam engine because you had to be right next to the thing. Electric motor could project over space and time. It took them 50 years to figure that out. Anybody see a steam engine anywhere anymore? It's gone. But the fact that it took 50 years, I think, is kind of instructive. How many people here are basketball fans? Here's another analogy. The three-point shot was introduced in the NBA in 1979. How many shots do you think today people shoot from the three-point line? Anybody know? Well, hold your thought because I'm going to show you. This is the shot chart from 2000 versus 2020. And if you look at the one in 2000, you see we're all there. It's all over the place. You got mid-range, you got under the basket, you got three-point shooting, but it's pretty evenly distributed. But look at 2020. Those are the top 200 shots in the NBA 20 years later. Clustered under the basket and at three-point land. There are no mid-range shots anymore. And in fact, what's particularly interesting is if you look at the number of three-point shots now, it was pretty low. It was under about 20% for a long period of time. And then 2010, 2012 comes around, all of a sudden it starts to increase. Now the number is almost 50%. That's an amazing number. Nearly half of all shots in the NBA now are three-point shots. But look at it. For 40 years, it was just paint on the ground, on the floor that nobody paid attention to. Why? It took a guy like Steph Curry to come along and change the game. He showed that you can shoot from three-point land and you can win the game. If you do the math, the analytics show that taking three-point shots and missing 60% of them is still better than taking two-point shots and missing, 50% of them. So the game changed because of Steph Curry, and it required a guy like him to show everybody else. Now everybody does it. And they look back at it now and they think, if you show this chart to modern NBA players, they'd be like, 20%? What were the other 80% of the shots? Why were people doing that? So it's funny how things change, and you look back on it, and you wonder, why didn't it happen sooner? Well, the reason why, and I love this quote, I'm going to have to go read it here. The thing about a revolution in technology is that it changes everything. That's why we call it revolutionary. And changing everything takes time and imagination and courage. Final quick note here on this. I was stunned by this. The picture on the left is from 1937. Would you believe that when they introduced shopping carts into grocery stores, that people wouldn't use them? So they had to hire models to walk around in the supermarket and push the carts around to demonstrate that this is something you should use. Or the one on the left there, anybody recognize that? Those are elevator operators. How many people have been in an elevator with an elevator operator? Yeah, it's everybody over the age of a certain no offense, you look young. Yeah, they don't exist anymore, right? But they had to use elevator operators because people were afraid to get in the elevator. They thought it was like a hanging guillotine, and it was going to fall and they were going to die. So they had elevator operators in there to give you the reassurance that it was a safe thing to do. It's also why there's a call button in there. There's also why there's a phone in there. And my absolute favorite, I just love this. You know that closed door button in the elevator? Would you believe that's actually a placebo button in most elevators? It's not at all tied to the door. Have you ever done that? You're pressing the thing, and why isn't it closing? Because you're just pressing a button that is not even wired to the elevator. They put that in there so that people would feel like they had control over what's going on. And you guys remember Muzak? That was the same thing. It was designed to allay your anxieties. Now, nobody cares about that. Now, nobody thinks about getting an elevator and it's going to fall, but this is the point. Things take time. So I'll bet, based on this, you think I'm going to predict AI is going to take a long time, it's going to be decades, everything takes just what the time it takes. No. Based on the research, this is where we are already when it comes to AI adoption. So if you can read this chart, which might be a little bit of an eye chart for some people, it shows where we are. And there are different groups like innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards. We are already, by most estimates, at the late majority phase. Now, this is stunning when you consider ChatGPT didn't exist 3.5 years ago. But I'm not even going to ask this question. I used to ask this question. How many people use ChatGPT or a robot? Every hand goes up, right? It's ridiculous. But there was a period in time, I remember, like 3 years ago, where people didn't know any of this stuff. And now, billions of people around the world are using this. So this adoption rate has greatly outpaced any other technology. Now, it doesn't mean that people are going to be resistant to it. It doesn't mean it's going to be fully embedded and adopted by everybody quickly. But I believe, based on the research I've done, and I do this, I live in this world, Michael knows this, I run a community of tens of thousands of B2B e-commerce professionals. I talk to these people constantly. And I can tell you above the surface there's one answer and below the surface there's another answer. In fact, I just had a lunch and people were telling me, yeah, above the surface we're telling everybody doing this. Below the surface we know we're way behind everybody else. Our experiments are wrong because we're trying to force the circle into the square. We're not changing our culture. We're not changing our processes. That's what has to change. If you don't change that, I always joke that, anything times an old process is like multiplying by 0. You can take a new technology and apply it to an old process, it's still going to fail. It just is. You've got to change the process, the mentality, the ecosystem, and that's the hard part. That's why the devil in this is in the details, and that's also why there's a significant bifurcation taking place right now. There are companies that are changing how they work. There are companies that are thinking differently about this stuff. They're AI native companies, which I'll talk about here in a moment. And there are other companies that think they got all the time in the world. Yeah, you know what? We're an incumbent. I call it the insurgent-incumbent dynamic. You got the incumbents who are like, you know what? Yeah, this AI thing's cool. We'll incorporate it, but we got time. Whereas the insurgents are thinking, no, you don't. And has anybody heard of a company called Harvey? It's an AI technology in the legal space. 0 to $200 million in ARR in 2 years. Wait a minute, what about Westlaw? What about LexisNexis? These databases have been there for 30, 40 years. They have AI too. Where did Harvey come from? So Harvey is one of these AI native companies that is an insurgent that is showing the other companies that are going to change. Now, I happen to believe, jumping a little bit ahead here, that those two worlds will coexist at the same time. One is not going to win over the other in the short term. In the very, very long term, the AI native companies are going to win. That's what always happens. But there will be a period of time where they will coexist. One might try to buy the other, but just to show you how ridiculous this change is. Everybody's heard of Anthropic, right? Salesforce is an investor in Anthropic. So when Salesforce invested in Anthropic, I think it was like 2 years ago, Anthropic was worth like $40 billion, and Salesforce's investment in them was worth a couple of $1 billion. Anybody know how much Anthropic is valued at today? $1 trillion. So technically speaking, Salesforce's investment in Anthropic is starting to rival the market cap of Salesforce. So try that one on for size for a moment. And if it goes public later this year, it's probably going to be worth more than that. So it could be that Anthropic, although they wouldn't do it, is in a much better position to buy Salesforce than the reverse. That's 2 years. Now you can say this is huff and puff and overdone and it's all going to the burble's going to burst and all that other stuff. I'm not so convinced. Are there inflated values? Potentially. But I think this is marking a transition in work life, human life, et cetera. And we're starting to see this, by the way, take place. So not only is everybody here using these AI bots, but here's an example of one vertical. You can see it over there as well. According to G2, which everybody I think knows who G2 is, 51% of B2B software buyers are starting with a ChatGPT or a Claude. That happened very quickly. And if you look at the other things on there, and I used to be a former analyst at Forrester, so thought leadership content, peers and colleagues, review sites, et cetera, yeah, this is happening very quickly already with software in B2B. And here's the shocker. Would you believe, everybody thinks everything starts in B2C and it comes to B2B later. So you test it in B2C and then you finesse it and sort of make it work in B2B. According to research from Forrester, 3 times the adoption level in B2B versus B2C today. And you know what? You think about it, it makes sense because a lot of people here probably use ChatGPT or whatever for personal reasons. But look, if you go shop for something, you're probably going to the website, you're probably having fun looking at stuff. Everybody here is using it at work. Because guess what? B2B buying isn't intended to be entertaining or fun. That's not the point. It's about efficiency. And if you can get an answer quickly, high quality answer, that gets it done. And I find a lot of B2C vendors don't get that. They think that B2B buyers want an experience and it's got to be beautiful and 360 resume, et cetera. No, most of them just want to get in and get out. Now, it's not an excuse for it looking like crap, like a green screen with a blinking monitor or with a blinking cursor. That's not the point of it. But does it have to have all the same bells and whistles? No. If you give me that and it takes too long, B2B buyers will say, get rid of that stuff, streamline it, make it nice and easy for me. So that's why I wrote this book. which I actually have a copy of here. It's the author's copy, so it's not completely done yet, but it'll be out in a couple of weeks. And there are a couple of people in this room who are actually in the book, and they know who they are. But it's 150 pages, 7 chapters. I go through every kind of dimension of B2B, dozens of interviews, lots of insights from people. I'm very proud of 2 things in particular. Every chapter has a 12-month checklist, meaning you can look at this and decide what you should be doing in the next 12 months. And the last thing, which I was a little nervous about doing, if I'm being honest, but I'm glad I did, is I'm literally sticking my neck out by saying I'm making predictions about what I think is going to happen in the next 2 years and the next 5 years, and also what's not going to happen in the next 2 years and 5 years. And so I'm planning to reissue this book every year or 2 with a new edition. So we're going to see if I got these things right or not. So this is really dangerous ground for an analyst because I can be held to what I'm saying here. So the thesis of the book and the point of all of this, and Michael tells me this is the most important slide in here, so I'm going to go slowly and take my time on this one. The journey of life as the journey in B2B commerce is a journey of 1,000 miles, hypothetically and metaphorically. I think everybody spends far too much time on the first mile, which is kind of this discovery mile, and on the fulfillment part, the 2 pieces on the ends. I think it's what I call the middle miles that matter in B2B. And there's a lot of AI already taking place in there. In fact, a lot of companies who don't think they're doing AI don't realize that the embedded systems they have already upgraded, already included AI, and they're actually already an AI shop in a way. So it's things like inventory and pricing bots and OMS and all sorts of stuff, tracking. So a lot of the software they're using, the commercial software, already has this technology embedded in it. This is where I think B2B is today, and where it's going is I think the bots are making their way outward. As the use cases get more compelling, as the technology evolves, as things get better, the middle miles are going to overtake the first and the last mile. We aren't there yet, not in every industry. Some industries are moving faster than others, but those bots in the middle, and I'll give you an example, a pricing bot. You may have a pricing bot that's operating in your S/4HANA, SAP, ERP, let's say hypothetically, or some middleware. Now, they're using that same bot to negotiate pricing with a client through a chatbot. It's powering that bot. Well, that's an example of a middle mile bot that was internal to your own system that's now working its way out because it was a use case where somebody wanted to get a special price or a CPQ system of sorts. But that pricing bot is powering the customer-facing stuff. Same thing with OMS, distributor order management, where they're tracking what warehouse things are in, where things should be for deploying inventory, et cetera. That used to be internal. But as FedEx showed us years ago, when you could start tracking a package, they turned it out. And so now people can actually use a lot of those technologies to find out where a product is going to be, which warehouse, how quickly is it going to get to me, what do I need, do I have to have guys on the dock to collect it, et cetera. So that's another example of a middleware or middle mile bot that's working its way out to the edges. So I can see people in here nodding their heads thinking, oh yeah, I can think of some use cases in my company where, gosh, I didn't realize we actually are doing that right now. We didn't even realize it. So give yourself some credit. So we don't have a ton of time, but I want to highlight 2 areas. So there's 7 chapters in the book, but there are really 2 areas that I'm aligning 2 different groups here. So I want to talk about where I see things going with regard to sales and customer service, and also with regard to content and data, one of my personal favorites because everybody has a content and data problem. Okay, so first, on the sales and customer service end of things. So if you guys can see that, there's 2 interesting pieces of data on here. This is Gartner. So according to Gartner, the number of AI agents will outnumber human sellers by 10x in 2028. But fewer than 40% of sellers will report in 2028 that the agents improve their productivity. How's that possible? Why do you keep cranking out agents, but at the same time reporting it's not improving your productivity? Remember what I said about 10, 15 minutes ago, that the culture, the processes, those are the things that have to change. I would venture a guess that if this holds true, it's not the fault of the bots. It's the fault of in this case, the sales of the customer service reps who have not evolved their way of working to accommodate this technology to make themselves more productive. I don't know about you guys, I've actually changed the way I work. I have, based on the way I use AI now. Just me from a year ago is different from me today, and I cannot really imagine what me in 2 years is going to look like. Are you guys familiar with super apps? These are, Claude Cowork. These are all coming out. We're going to see a lot of them coming out. I talk about this in the book. I think that's going to revolutionize the buy side of this. We don't have time to talk about that today, but who here is not going to be using a super app in a couple of years? And who isn't going to have the super app, when you wake up in the morning, it says, okay, you got 5 things you got to do by 10 a.m., you got to approve this, you got to do that. This is all going to come from your super app. So if you think about that, your world's going to look a lot different in just a couple of years. And these things are coming quickly. So we will see some people will embrace those things and they'll go like this, and other people will reject it and they'll kind of peter along, and there'll be more of a bifurcation and more of a disconnect. And so I often think and say that I think AI is going to make stars superstars. I'm not so sure it's going to make average people stars, because those average people who don't change the way they work are going to kind of like level out. So there's an opportunity to go from a star to superstar if you use the technology the right way. Here's another interesting piece of data. There used to be something called the golden hour. Back in the day, when somebody would call a client, or a client would call in, if you return that phone call, if the sales rep returned the phone call within an hour, you had a pretty high probability of closing the business. Well, over time, that time has shrunk. Research recently identified something called the golden 5 minutes. Pretty soon it's going to be the golden 7 seconds, right? And what they argue, based on research, is the odds of qualifying a lead drop by 80% after the first 5 minutes. So if somebody sends you something, a request for quote, at 1 o'clock, and you get back to them by 1:05, after that, the odds of you getting that business fall by 80%. 80%. So imagine this for a moment. You're getting lots of these inquiries. You have contract pricing, which can change radically within an organization. There's a lot of variables here. How in the world is a human going to be able to keep up with all of that? Especially as this 5-minute window shrinks, and pretty soon it'll be 1 minute, 30 seconds, and let's face it, you're going to put in a request, and if you don't get an answer immediately, you're going to move on. I used to be like this with Uber. I remember the first time I tried Uber, and it arrived 15 minutes later. I'm like, my God, only 15 minutes. I have canceled Ubers that have been going more than 5 minutes. Tell me you haven't too, right? That's how impatient we've gotten. So I think it'll be inconceivable in just a couple of years that anybody in this room will wait a day or two to hear back from a company. I mean, that happens today, and it's obscene. Now, there's a whole issue around whether we should be more patient, but this is where it's going. And I don't know of many companies structurally, from a process and culture perspective, are ready to accommodate something like this. But what will probably happen is if you don't, the bots and the agents will just go around you. This is another interesting piece of data. And to this point, 78% of B2B customers now purchase from the vendor that responds first, regardless of whether they are the cheapest option. So speed has its own quality. And again, to the point, I've done this myself. I get something quickly, I want to get it done, I see it. I'm not that impatient a guy either. It's just I don't want to be like having this drag on in my head. I save 5% from whatever, who cares? I'll pay the extra 5%. This is the world we're going to, and bots are going to be particularly good at optimizing for this. So I'm not going to read any of this, just to say this is like in the book. I don't believe that just because the bots are going to be more successful at doing this stuff that the humans are going away. Some people who've known me for years know that I wrote a famous piece of research almost 10 years ago to the day called Death of a B2B Salesman, where I predicted that order takers would disappear. And I think I was right about that one, actually. I also said that consultative selling would be even a more prized capability, and it has become that. It's also, again, bifurcated. You've got people who are really good at selling service, and they're really doing customer service and consulting in a way, as opposed to just taking orders. But if you're just booking an order, E-commerce today. Tomorrow, it's going to be bots. So I said this about sales. We are seeing this, and this is what happened with Death of a B2B Salesman too. It happened first in customer service. If you want to see where sales is going, look at customer service. It's sort of like a precursor to that. So the research has shown pretty clearly here, if you can see this slide, that today most of the customer service interactions are human-led. In the near future, they're going to be more hybrid, but we're moving quickly to a scenario, and I've seen this, where it's actually AI-led. How many people have heard of a company called Sierra? See, I only knew about them very recently. $2 billion company. It's only 2 years old. It's a customer service company, but they develop agents for customer service. It's all AI. It started by Mike Taylor, actually, who was the CEO of, he was one of the founders of Facebook and also the CEO of Salesforce until recently. But it was a rethinking. It was one of these AI native companies and said, hey, why don't we just do AI bots to do all the customer service instead of starting with a human system and AI-ifying and wrapping AI around it. Again, I think we're going to see more of this. They've been hugely successful. They've penetrated a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, and they're off to the races. Again, it's another Harvey, AI native company, started without any of the baggage associated with the legacy or incumbent systems, and they've done really well. So much so that Gartner predicts that by 2029, AI will autonomously resolve 80% of common customer service interactions. I had something recently where we had an outage near our house and our power company. I contacted the power company and I thought I can just, I went to the chat bot and it said it only reads the website. So it couldn't tell me about any outages, even though that's just known information. So I had to wait on the phone for 15 minutes for the agent to come on and say, oh yeah, there's an outage. I'm like, well, when's it going to be done? We don't know. I'm like, so I had to wait 15 minutes for you to tell me that there's an outage? Why couldn't the bot have done that on your initially? So this is my point. The bot should do that, right? That's an old process at a utility company. But again, 5 years from now, I assure you that will not be the case. That will absolutely be botified, for sure. And by the way, there are examples of companies that are already there on this customer service front. Lowe's, and they've got a lot of press for this, they have a chatbot that's hands over 1 million interactions a month, where it answers questions. I played with it. Ask a question, it gives you a really good answer. I mean, it's not the only one. There's a ton of these things out there. But here's a company we all know, which, by the way, Lowe's, little known fact, is as much B2B as it is B2C. In fact, I think it's crossing that threshold now, where it's over 50% B2B. So think about that for a moment. Lowe's is actually not a retailer. It's a B2B company that has retail locations. Bet you guys didn't know that. All right, so the other one I want to talk about here quickly is managing content and data. This is a personal favorite of mine because without this, there is nothing. And I think we all know that. So here's a couple pieces of data as if we need to know this. But poor data maturity can erode up to 80%, or I'm sorry, up to 20% of revenue through mispricing, inefficiencies, and lost opportunities. How many people think that number is actually higher than 20%? Exactly. So this is a conservative estimate. Anybody who's done any AI work knows that this is like, serving water in your house. If you're getting water from a dirty pool, it isn't going to work. Which is why this is an area where a lot of companies have spent a lot of time. Unfortunately, they're not very good at it. So what this shows is that kind of a meta-analysis of some of these projects. Companies that have below, let's say, 50% data quality, most of the projects fail. The AI projects fail. If you go above 80% data quality, it succeeds 75% of the time. So there's a clear correlation here. You got to have data quality or the projects are just absolutely going to fail. How do you get there? Well, that's another discussion, but some companies start with a mindset like, we're going to clean up this data if it's the last thing we do. I assure you, if I talk to everybody in this room, you'd all have a story about we've had to make a decision, what are we doing about our data? And there's probably some of the people who say, well, let's just make it a little bit better. Other people are like, we got to start over from scratch. I'm sure it's a very interesting dynamic within the organization. The answer is, you got to make it work, period. If the data's dirty, as I like to say, you're not getting anywhere with AI. And what are you going to do, not get anywhere with AI? So it's necessary to really do this. And the research has shown that companies that are considered by researchers to be AI-first companies, they have things like well-established, mature, and modern data and governance frameworks. So again, we're starting to see this bifurcation. Companies that are not AI first, they don't have the right mentality. Surprise, surprise, they have bad data, they have inefficient governance frameworks, or have none at all. So I want to close here with a couple of just quick examples of some companies that are doing this. These are B2B companies that are doing this today. There's a company called Klockner Metals. They make steel. And they're using quotation bots right now. Can read a customer's email request and generate a price in seconds. There are a bunch of technologies out there now that can do this. This isn't like earth-shattering, but the fact that they had, imagine how that conversation went. They have sales reps. You think the sales reps warmly embrace this idea of having the bot like read the customer's email and then give a price back, where they're kind of losing a bit of control? The smart ones realize the bot can do a quote faster than they can, and then send them business while they're sitting on the pool, listening to the game. That's what happened with digital too. The companies that, sales reps who embraced digital did really, really well. Because as my friend Marta Dalton used to say, ecommerce is the friendly service that sells in the middle of the night when you're asleep. Bots are going to be that on steroids. Everybody's probably seen these trucks driving around. It's a company called Cisco. It's one of the largest food distributors in the United States. I think it's all of North America, actually. They have a feature called Swap and Save, which uses order history, pricing data, and product compatibility models to recommend cuisine-specific recommendations. This seems like really tactical and very specific, but their customers are bars and restaurants. And if somebody goes to order something, and this thing comes back and says, oh, you know what? You were going to do the Brussels sprouts. Why don't you try this spinach instead? By the way, we'll give you a promotion for that. It's available. It can be there tomorrow. And if you don't like it, you can return it. No harm, no foul. That all came from a bot, which, again, sales reps can do this too. I get it. But not as fast and definitely not at scale. And the last example here is a company called Fastenal. I think people here, fasteners, et cetera, have heard of Fastenal. They have something really interesting. They have an AI agent that will, it's almost like an IoT function, that will tell you that you're consuming this abrasive disc 20% faster than usual and says, would you like to increase your safety stock accordingly? Pretty cool. Because this actually could evolve into a subscription service too. And so I keep telling vendors this too. If you have this technology and you're talking to your clients about it, make sure they know about it. Because this is value. It makes your system a lot more valuable too. I think we have an epidemic actually among vendors, present company excluded, where their clients largely don't have any idea what capability they currently possess. It's a education function that needs to happen. I've talked to people all the time that go out and buy a third-party CPQ, and I'm like, you realize they got a CPQ in that particular platform? I'm like, oh, they do? I didn't know that. That happens a lot. So it's incumbent upon companies to let people know, and increasingly so, because you guys are releasing features all the time. And these guys could be not only knowing they have this stuff, but generating incremental revenue using it. And with bots, it's even more impressive. So I did talk about the book and how at the end of the book, I make some predictions. Well, these are some of the things that I talk about in the book. I mentioned the super app buying, agent swarms. This is not science fiction. This stuff exists today. There's a lot of discussion about the end of the browser. You guys have probably heard this too. Is the browser going away? Because if the bots are going to read the website, who needs a browser? It'll just read the machine language. Hyper-local inventory. And my favorite, headless distributors, which are distributors that only sell to machines. That's it. They don't have humans involved. So in closing here, people have asked me if you had to sum up sort of what your approach on this and how AI is affecting B2B. I was reminded of this great quote from a famous book called The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. And one of the characters in the book says to the other one, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. I think this is 100% the sentiment that I think is going to be the case in AI, with AI and B2B. Right now, we're in the gradual phase. but I think it's going to be very sudden at some point. And the question I have for the B2B companies I talk to is, are you ready for that? Because it's coming very quickly. So on that note, I want to thank you guys for being so attentive. And Michael has graciously offered to make a free copy of the book available for those of you who want to scan this QR code. I think he said he's going to, yeah, thank you, Michael. He said he's going to personally deliver it too, right? After you finish the Iron Man? Yeah. Oh, I sign them? We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, but the book is coming out in a couple weeks, so if you want to get a copy of it, be great. So that's me. If you guys have any questions or want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. I don't know, Michael, I ran over, I'm sure, but do we have a couple of minutes for any questions that people might have?
I think we need to cover it. Maybe at dinner tonight.
Okay, all right. Well, I think that's it. So thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it.